Hey guys, excuse me. Welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in Luke chapter 6, and this is Luke's version of, or Luke's accounting of the Sermon on the Mount. As I said last time, that it is not as comprehensive. It's not as comprehensive as, I know I butchered that word anyway, as Matthew's account. Excuse me. And the reason why is because Matthew combines a lot of the sermons, or a few of the sermons. Okay, he combines a few of the sermons into one, and Luke is going to spread them out. But he is talking about his criteria for being a disciple, his disciple. And so when we kind of understand this, it will help us to understand why God navigates us through the world. Now, this is a good example. Here's an example. When you think about the Christian suffering, okay, the Christian suffering, and then the purpose of the Christian suffering. And I think I got into a little bit last time about there is a difference in suffering as a direct result of your faith, and then the hardships of life. And the hardships of life come and happen for various reasons. Okay, they could be your own doing. They could be somebody else's. Okay, um, and a whole lot of things. And then the root cause is Adam's sin. How Adam, uh, his sin, excuse me, his sin caused all of this. Okay, it caused all the grief that we go through, and sometimes it's the curse in the earth, right? When you think about hardships now, I don't know if it's because we have more news reporting it, but it certainly seems like that there is, more tornadoes, more hurricanes. And then, of course, that, the hardships that come because of those weather atrocities. Whole towns destroyed. So think of the hardships there. You have to rebuild. That's hardships, though. You think about cancer, right? Diseases, all kinds of diseases, right? And then of course the hardships that they present. Now, those are hardships. What Jesus here is teaching is not the hardships of life, but the persecutions that comes as a direct result of your faith, a direct result of your faith in Jesus. Okay. Don't know why I'm not showing this here. Okay. But anyway, so let's jump into it. Luke, I'm going to pick it up where we left off. Okay, so we left off here in verse 24. And remember, this is what he taught, what is commonly known as the Beatitudes. The scripture doesn't say they are Beatitudes, or as people may say, a blessed attitude or something like that. They are really qualities. This is what should be in you, right? You who are poor are blessed. You are hungry will be filled, okay? So let's pick it up at verse 24. He says, "But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your comfort. Woe to you who are now full, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are now laughing, for you will mourn and reap. Woe to you when people speak well of you, for in this way the ancestors, for this is the way their ancestors used to treat the false prophets. Verse 27, but I say unto you, listen, love your enemies, do what is good to those that hate you. Bless those that curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If anyone hits you on the cheek, offer the other also. And if anyone takes away your coat, don't hold back your shirt either. Now, again, we kind of really delved into this in Matthew 24. I won't do it here. The whole purpose, again, is we are set in the earth as lights. This attitude, these qualities basically allow us to be seen. So if you think about, if I come up to you and insult you, right? And then you curse me out. If I curse you, you curse me out. What is being seen? The conflict, the cursing, right? Who can curse the loudest? If I come and slap you on the face and you slap me back, well, you got a fight that's going on. By the way, a lot of people really trip over this thing here. Is Jesus really saying that we should kind of like be battered, be battered about? The idea here is not a person that is fighting you. But really, the idea is insulting you. So you say a person. Now, you might have seen some kind of movie or TV show where a lady gets mad at somebody and slaps them. And basically, it's just a slap. The idea was that the slap wasn't intended to start a fight. That wasn't the intent. The intent was to insult. They were insulting you. They just happened to do it in a violent way, but that was the intent. That's what when Jesus means that. When somebody slaps you because they're insulting you, okay? He says, offer the other also. Now, why is that? Because then the person is seeing you. Now, he's not dealing with here in a fight situation. In other words, if somebody wants to go hands-on and start swinging, he's not talking about that. And if you even think about how Jesus handled a potential fight situation, if you'll remember back in chapter 4, let me see if I can scroll back to that. And I think you can get a picture of what he means here. Okay, this is chapter 4. Remember when he came out of the wilderness, he goes to the synagogue and then he teaches them. He tells them, he opens the scroll to Isaiah and says that this scripture is fulfilled, has been fulfilled. And then he makes this statement down here that I assure you no prophet is except in his hometown, but I say to you that there are certainly many widows in Israel in Elijah's day when the sky was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, while a great famine came over all the land. Yet Elijah was not sent to any of them, but to a widow at Zarephath in Sidon. And in the prophet Elijah's time, there were many in Israel who had serious skin disease, yet none of them were healed, only Naaman the Syrian. When they heard this, everyone in the synagogue was enraged. I don't know why they got so enraged over this, but they were enraged. And then he says, and they got up and drove him out of town and brought him to the edge of the hill that their town was built on, intending to hurl him over the cliffs, but he passed right through them and the crowd and went on his way. Now, here's the situation where they were going hands on. And not only were they going hands on, but they were intended to toss him off of the hill. He just walked through the midst of them. He just kind of walked through. There are other situations in the gospel when the Pharisees got so, and the Pharisees never intended, well, they didn't care about the violence. They just never wanted to, they didn't want to cause a riot. But there were times, and the reason why they didn't want to cause a riot is because riots were bad. If they could not control the people, they would lose their great positions. They enjoyed power. Okay? They enjoyed power and then privilege. Now, they were seen as pious men. They were seen as holy men. They were seen as religious men. But in deep down, they were hypocrites. They enjoyed the power, and they willed that the people feared them. They were. I mean, if you go back in church history, I'm kind of going to veer off a minute. If you go through church history, I'm talking about this power here. The Catholic Church in its heyday wielded so much power. I think the 10th century was probably at its highest power, that the Pope had certainly power over the Catholic Church. But he also had such influence over the political scheme that it was said that one king had enraged the Pope. So in order to gain his forgiveness, he took his family in the wintertime and traveled to beg the Pope's forgiveness. The Pope made him stand out in the snow barefooted for 3 days before he would see him. That's the kind of power he wielded. And of course, it was even worse than that in terms of, setting up kings, people in power and stuff. So, but the Roman during this time, the Pharisees had power under Rome. And the one thing that they did not want, they could not afford to have, is a riot, because that's why they were there. So if they could not control the people, Rome's attitude was, you don't need to be in here. So there were times when they even lost control and wanted to fight Jesus. They wanted to lay hands on Jesus, and he would just kind of slip away. Now, what am I saying all that for? Because there's a difference when he says here, if they slap you on the cheek, offer the other. That's an insulting situation. How you should handle if someone wants to lay hands on you, avoid it. Sometimes you may not be able to avoid it, but um, have wisdom to. And when I say have wisdom too, I hear Christians sometimes, and it's funny today because I hear Christians that have no problems with getting on the same level as the world, and they will boast in that. But the wisdom would be, and I as probably a way older person, I would learn, okay, don't say something that's going to incite someone. Don't do something that will incite someone. And I'm not talking about, again, let's say something that's a direct result of your faith. Don't put yourself in a situation where violence happens. And as the proverb says, sometimes a soft answer does turn away wrath. So you can kind of, employ the wisdom of Proverbs sometimes to avoid that kind of situation where, you know, um, you're talking about a fight situation. If you're in I'll say this too, if you are in a relationship that's abusive, and I mean physically abusive, get out of that situation. God never tells you to stay in that kind of situation. You can say, you can love and forgive from afar. Now, there's some people that will tell you to stay in those kind of situations. Again, that's not one scripture ever tells you to stay in that kind of abuse. In fact, Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, if if you're in a situation where you are married, and he basically says between two believers there's no divorce. So we're not going to, of course, unpack that, but that's okay. That's just plain as it can be. Between two believers, no divorce. But then he says this. He throws this in here. If you leave, remain unmarried, or be reconciled. And I believe that statement was, Paul put that in there, one, as a mercy, as a what they call a safety valve. That notice he said, if you leave, the only thing is don't go and get don't go marry again, because you get into a situation where it's not a biblical marriage. You're committing adultery. So he says, if you leave. Now, why? He doesn't even give reasons why. He doesn't even give qualifications. He says you can only leave under these circumstances. He just simply says, if you leave, you must remain unmarried or be reconciled. So right there, I think that's to me God's mercy. You don't have to stay in situations that are just so unbearable, and especially if it comes to situations that are abusive, and then work it out. Even if you want to say you have to work it out. So I think that's, it puts some light here when Jesus said, verse 29 again, if anyone hits you on the cheek, offer the other. And then he said, if anyone takes away your coat, don't hold back. The reason for this is you are showing your light. In other words, you're not reacting. You're not reacting negatively. Negative. You're not in a negative way. And that allows people to watch you. Why aren't you responding? And again, and so um, um, when he says, love your enemies, do what is good to those that hate you. Boy, is that hard sometimes. Think about that. Love your enemies. Do what is good to those that hate you. And then he says, pray and bless those that curse you. Now again, here's what he's not saying. Be a glutton for punishment. That's not what he's saying. He is saying, pray for those that curse you. And Jesus, of course, will exemplify this on the cross when he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Stephen would later exemplify this as they were stoning him. He says, Lord, lay not this sin to their charge. Paul in 2 Timothy is writing as he is expected to die, and he says, I pray that this does not, those that deserted him and done him wrong, he says, I pray that you don't lay this sin to their charge. So you see, we have three examples, prime examples of when he says, bless those that curse you, pray for those that mistreat you. You can't get worse than, remember Jesus was framed, charges were trumped up. And here on the cross, he says, forgive them. Now, why is that? Who you don't know sometimes who might have been present there that watched that. We know that soldiers watched that and were moved by what they saw. People, and think about this: Stephen, whom Paul was a legal witness to his execution, he was the one that sort of signed off on it. Later, will utter the same words, and let's no doubt he had to remember that he heard Stephen praying the same thing, and how that affected him. And it certainly might not have affected him. Might not have affected him um, um, right at the present. But those words came back, and he said, "Lord," again in 2 Timothy, "Lord, do not lay this sin to their charge." And the whole point is, again, we are here to let our light shine. So we are here. In other words, and this is what this is all what kind of suffering means. We allow this so that God's light can shine. All right, we'll pick this up in the next study. And I'm going to change my title heading here. That's why sometimes I leave things blank. But anyway, but again, we can always walk in wisdom through this world, shining our light. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. As always, if you have a thought or comment, add to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.